everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Day of Dialogue. My name is Eden. My name is Seja, and we both use she, her, hers. And we'd like to welcome you to the LGBTQ Day of Dialogue. Before we begin, we are asking everyone to turn off their cell phones. We are streaming this presentation into classrooms, and cell phones will interrupt streaming. Thank you. Throughout today's Day of Dialogue, there will be presentations on a wide variety of issues affecting the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community. We encourage you to stop by our tables outside the auditorium to buy merchandise and to get more information about the GSA. We meet on Wednesdays after school in room 309, and both members of the LGBTQ community and allies are welcome.
Now we are going to start the assembly, telling our stories. In this assembly, various BHS students and staff will share their stories as members of the LGBTQ plus community. The first person to speak will be Anjali Matthews. Thank you and enjoy.
I hope I don't break this. Hello. Welcome to the Day of Dialogue. My name is Anjali Matthew. I'm a junior. Thank you. And when I first started writing this, I thought I had no story. For me, there was no debate. When I realized that I was bisexual, it wasn't a big deal. There was no huge internal struggle, no crushing anxiety. I wasn't caught between the closet and the outside world. When I told my parents, their reaction was basically a shrug. Kind of, all right, so what, no big deal. I was surprised because I thought they would at least have a few questions, but they didn't. My mom told me about how the only club at her college was a GSA, and my dad automatically started saying guy or girl when talking about who I would marry. You know, the normal conversation for annoying fathers of high school girls. The most blowback I got from my family was when I posted a photo of me at Pride on my Instagram for National Coming Out Day. My aunt commented a single question mark, like, huh? And me and my cousin were like, does she not have gay people where she lives? And in the end, it didn't matter because my aunt accepted me for who I am, and that was that. All in all, I've never had to worry about my identity. I felt accepted wherever I go because, at least in our community, it doesn't feel like that big of a deal to be queer. And anyway, unless I explicitly told you, it's likely that you wouldn't be able to tell that I'm bisexual when you look at me or when you talk to me, or even if you've known me for a long time. The default is straight, so unless you saw me holding hands with a girl, most people would assume that I'm not gay. So when I started writing this, I didn't feel like I had a story because, unlike some of my peers, I haven't struggled or faced discrimination or been harassed or teased or whatever. And for many of my LGBT friends and classmates, many of you, that rings true. But I did have a story, one of acceptance and friendship and normalcy. I'm grateful to have grown up here, where I've always felt free. But I worry for the day when I may not. I recently learned that according to the National Center for Transgender Equality, 61% of bisexual women have experienced sexual violence at some time in their lives, as opposed to 35% of straight women and 44% of lesbian women. 61%, right? That's a lot of people. I've heard college campus horror stories about sexual assault, including corrective rape, where people have the idea that raping a gay person will correct their sexuality so they're straight. I've heard about the harassment experienced every day by people like me. The fear, the isolation, and the fetishization that I could be subject to if I were out with a girlfriend or if people knew that I was bi. Not to mention the legal discrimination laws in 30 states that can allow people to deny me jobs or housing solely because I'm not straight. And then just over a year from now, I'm going to college. I'm leaving here, maybe for the next state over, or maybe all the way across the country. Who knows what I'll experience there? How I will feel walking down the street. Will I feel safe? Accepted? Will I be judged? Will I be turned away from friends and classmates and coworkers because they don't agree with my identity, because they think I'll do something to them, that I'm a threat to their lifestyle or religion? crazy to think because that's not what I've experienced here, and yet I've heard countless stories of it happening across the U.S., and that scares me. Growing up and traveling and experiencing new things, it's supposed to be exciting and fun, but I'm not so sure. No one can guarantee that I will be able to live my life as genuinely as I've been able to here. So I thank everyone who has contributed and will continue to contribute to making our community a better place. But I say that with a grain of salt, knowing that until the decency and respect we show here is mirrored wherever life takes us next, our work is not done yet. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. My name's Nick Slayton. I'm a junior, and I wake up every morning blessed with the knowledge that I have the biggest gay family in the world. Occasionally, I feel like my parents must see me like Greg and Eigel saw Tennessee the other night, the only blemish on an otherwise perfect bracket. 6 gay family members to 1 straight kid still seems pretty unprecedented, though. For that reason, I thought there must be some crazy differences or insights I could draw from my family experience. But all I've been able to come up with is the way my family feels normal. While my parents are incredibly supportive of whatever choices my siblings and I make, they often feel suffocating all the same. They frequently straddle the line between protecting and restraining, which generally feels unfair, like they don't want me to experience the world or learn things the hard way. What they don't realize is that if I never get to wake up exhausted after a night of RDR2, I'll just keep playing the game until 8:20 the next morning. We want to push the envelopes ourselves, bumping into walls along the way, but people taking care of us want to cushion the impact too often. They restrain us for fear, but that fear is usually fostered by compassion. Even my parents, who have surely had their self-expression suppressed countless times, attempt to restrict the expression of my siblings in ways that can cripple their self-confidence. When my little sibling, Oliver, who is genderqueer, was in 6th grade or so, they began to take interest in makeup. They appreciated the art from afar, watching shows like RuPaul's Drag Race and James Charles' YouTube videos obsessively. They couldn't wait until they were allowed to take part. So one day, when the opportunity arose for Oliver to wear lipstick on TV, Oliver jumped on it with my mom's permission. Oliver spoke to the newscaster, red lips flapping with their characteristically frantic speak. They were happy. That moment was short-lived, though, as my dad quickly found out about the situation and confronted my mom, asking her what she was doing allowing I have trouble with it too, my little sibling to wear such things on TV. I've never seen my dad angrier. And as he yelled at my mom, she gradually heated up as well. My dad was so adamant in his position because of how scared he was of the repercussions Oliver could face if they appeared that way in public, let alone on TV. But the consequences of my dad screaming were undeniably more negative than the backlash Oliver faced from wearing lipstick on TV. When Oliver came to China last year for a week, I became increasingly fearful of the negative response Oliver could face from my host family. They rarely saw young girls wearing makeup, let alone a gender-queer kid usually looking very glamorous. When Oliver arrived, I never voiced my concern, but silently hoped that Oliver would leave dinner that night just as comfortable in their skin as they are in America. I sat in the private room of a lamb restaurant with my Chinese family, waiting for my American family to arrive. Possible calamities reeled past my mind's eye, but I ignored them. Not long after, Oliver and my mom walked through the door, smiling and greeting my host parents. "Nice to meet you all," my mom said. My host father spoke English well enough. "Hello," he said in response, and then looked at Oliver. "Wow," he exclaimed. "So beautiful." I exhaled. That sentiment was repeated constantly by my host father throughout the time Oliver and my mom were in China. Each time I winced at the idea that I thought Oliver would be rejected not long before. I was afraid for Oliver, but that fear came from a place of love. I didn't want them to get hurt. I'm sure my dad felt the same way when he reprimanded Oliver for wearing lipstick. But if I acted on my fear and kept Oliver from my family, they would have never experienced the praise. Alternatively, the reception could have gone terribly wrong as I imagined, but still, the experience would have been valuable all the same. Regardless, in keeping Oliver from meeting my host family, I would have stolen a valuable experience from them, one which they were ready to undertake. Far too often these opportunities to grow are extinguished due to overprotection. People want to protect their loved ones, and the easiest way to do that is to contain them. The harder way is to let go. Love should propel you through life, and at times through uncharted territory. One of the most substantial things my family has taught me is that this uncharted territory is what makes us, us. We need to be pushed forward, not held back by our parents and ourselves in approaching these situations. We should all look at Steve Will Do It and his willingness to send it for inspiration. That man loves himself, and I'm sure he's learned more from sending it than anyone could, being held back for fear of being themselves. We need to take my little sibling's lead and let love push us further. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jill Seaman Chandler. I use she, her, hers as my pronouns, and I am privileged to be on the nursing team here at the high school. So this is a little bit of my story. A few years ago, when my son was still small enough to have to sit in the back seat of the car, he asked me as we drove along, "Mama, are there more gay or straight people in the world?" When I told him there were many more folks who identified as straight than gay, he gave a defeated sigh, clearly disappointed at my response. Ever the competitor, it was though I told him our team lost. My son has at least 4 close friends who, like him, are growing up with 2 moms. And he knows a lot of other LGBT adults through our community of friends and our church family. Given this, it's no wonder he could conceive of a world dominated by queer folks. I marvel at how different his experience is from mine of growing up mostly in the Midwest and the South. I didn't know a single person who was gay as a young child and don't ever remember encountering the concept, though I must have at some point, because I remember asking myself at the age of 9 years old, am I gay? Looking back, I'm not sure what prompted this. Was it because I liked sports? Was it because I wore my hair short? Was it because I often got the question, are you a boy or a girl? Over the years, the questions I asked myself about identity became more sophisticated, but the conversations remained ones that I had alone. When I started to feel desperate to talk to someone, I didn't really know where to turn. I finally sought help from the local internet at the time, formerly known as the white pages of the phone book. I felt hopeful when I came across a listing for the gay information line. Bingo! The cruel irony is, nobody ever answered. I called several times at various points during the day, only to hear endless ringing. The good news is that I made it through high school relatively unscathed. I finally stumbled upon some friends who were also in the process of coming out to themselves, and we would do silly things together, like go to the mall and people watch to hone our gaydar. It made us feel less alone. In college, I found a greater sense of community and a growing confidence. A big reason for this was being part of our school's basketball team, whose players were gay and straight in equal numbers. We even ran onto the court before games to Diana Ross's song, "I'm Coming Out." It felt so affirming. But my security in that identity was confined to campus. While I had plenty of queer-identified peers, I still had no adult role models. I had no idea what it might look like to build a life for myself, either personally or professionally, as a queer woman. I figured out the personal side of things more quickly. Meeting my partner Beth in my mid-20s, she and I have been together for 19 years, married for 5. We have 2 kids, 2 dogs. It's the whole white picket fence thing. But professionally, I really struggled. My first job out of school was as an assistant college basketball coach. Though my coach in college and the coach I worked for were both gay, neither of them were ever out to their teams or their colleagues. So when I became a head coach, I followed their lead, not knowing any other way. And it was a miserable existence, and it really impeded my ability to develop relationships, meaningful relationships at work. Not to mention, it robbed my players of a role model that I know some of them needed just as much as I had at their age. When I left coaching after 5 years, I made a promise to myself that I would never again remain closeted professionally. And it's one that I've kept. When I applied to be a nurse here, I came out in my final round interview. And I continue to come out over and over again. It can still be hard sometimes, but it is so important. It's important for me, and it's important for our shared community here at BHS. So going back to that day I was in the car with my son, he thought for a moment after I answered the question, and then he said to me, "You know, Mama, if I get married someday, it'll probably be to a girl. No offense." None taken, I smiled to myself. I wish for my son what I wish for all of you, to live a life of authenticity that feels true to who you are. Thank you.
Hello. Wow, that's loud. Hello. My name is Peter Racklin, and I'm a queer masculine guy, and this is my story. I've been trying to speak at Dailogue since I was a freshman, and year after year I've been left unchosen. In fact, at one point, I almost gave up on ever speaking and thought it was pointless to even try. But I didn't for one simple reason. I have a story I must tell. Now, anyone who knows me understands that I'm a masculine guy. I'm a 12-season athlete. I was a captain of the cross-country team. Before I even got to BHS, I was a second-degree black belt, and I define being a masculine guy, at least partly, as having the strength to endure anything and everything life throws at you. That's just how I was raised, and that's what I still believe. I was this way too when I was younger, if not more so. I was brought up on movies like Rocky, playing sports, and pushing through any injury or pain because that's what I thought being a man was, and being a man was a core belief of mine. When I started on my journey of being queer, I was 11 or 12. I didn't know why, but I knew I liked guys right away. I lied to myself for years that I didn't because that went against what it meant to be a man to me. I knew in my heart and in my mind that I liked guys, but I just continued to lie and hate myself more than you can ever imagine because I didn't want to be a faggot. Being one went against all my ideas of who I was and who I wanted to be. I continued to hate myself for years. I was bullied, and I was a violent person who did violent things that I'm not proud of. Eventually, the right person walked into my life. This person, just like me, was coming to terms with their own sexuality. When they finally came out to me, I was amazed by one thing, their strength. When they came out to me, they had made themselves extremely vulnerable, unsure how I would have reacted and treated them. In that moment, I understood the pure amount of strength it took for them to open themselves up in such a way. In that moment, I learned that vulnerability was not the opposite of strength, and there was strength in vulnerability. So I made myself more vulnerable around her. I came out to them eventually. I even started being more vocal about my issues. I spoke to her about how I hated myself for being queer, and the pain I felt from being at war with myself for so long. With this person by my side, supporting me, and just listening to my issues, my hate led to tolerance, and tolerance led to acceptance. My ideas on what it meant to be a man changed dramatically, and I could finally balance the duality of both being queer and a man in my mind. When I got to BHS, I had a whole new set of issues. When I was part of more masculine groups like a few sports teams I was on, I felt like I didn't belong. I remember as a freshman trying out for a team. I showed up to tryouts, and the moment I got there, I heard some of the other guys cracking gay jokes at one another's expense, and I just remember thinking, if this is how they joke about queer guys with one another, how are they going to treat me? I threw tryouts. I had to go every day of tryouts because of my parents and had to act like I wanted to be there, but when I would rather be anywhere else. Other masculine groups I was a part of, I was treated as an oddity. To many people, I would never fully fit their idea of what it meant to be a man or masculine because I was queer, so I was always kept at an arm's length away and never fully embraced. Similarly, with less masculine groups at BHS, I was never fully accepted. I was labeled with terms like straight passing that meant because I didn't look, act, or sound stereotypically gay, people assumed I was straight, which stripped me of my identity. The same people believed that I could just hide behind the facade of masculinity and avoid any persecution and acted like I had no struggles. I could never be a part of GSA because if you're an athlete or anyone with any outside commitments after school, you couldn't be a part of it. Unless you put being queer above everything else and you make it your main prerogative, you can't really be a part of GSA. I don't have being queer as my defining quality, so I feel GSA has never represented me. This idea of being unrepresented is nothing new either. When I look to queer guys in media for a role model, I come up with nothing. I find Elton John, RuPaul, Neil Patrick Harris, Mitch and Cam from Modern Family, but none of those people represent me. When I look to more masculine medias like the world of sports, people like me are either forced to stay in the closet or blackballed out of their positions. Without these public figures, I don't have role models, and people don't understand there is a massive difference between the masculine portion of the queer male community and the more feminine portion. Without this representation, I'm treated like I'm a queer feminine guy, when everything from our culture to issues to needs are extremely different. My name is Peter Racklin. I'm a queer masculine guy, and this has been my story.
Hi, my name is Henry, and I'm a sophomore. And the reason why I'm speaking to you today is that I have two aunts who identify as gay. I have two cousins, Ari and Diona Shapiro, who are the sons of Amy Shapiro. And my aunt Ruth Irvin is my mom's older sister. My family is really supportive of them. The company legalized gay marriage on October 6, 2014. A couple of years back, my friend and I went to the wedding. My brother and I were the greeters. My cousin walked him down the aisle, and my mom was on the podium. She got married in Wisconsin. The wedding was really beautiful, and everyone got a cry. She stepped on grass, because that's the Jewish custom that's used at weddings. When people say mean comments about gay people, I feel offended because it is judgmental and wrong. I am out of the LGBTQ plus community. According to Leviticus 19:33 and 34, state that you shall treat the stranger who sons you with you as a day among you, and you shall love him as yourself. It was mentioned 46 times in the Torah. The code stated that you shall love the stranger as well as you. Everyone is an outcast somehow.
Hey, my name is Kate Thibodeau. I'm a senior, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. I waited until senior year to speak at Day of Dialogue. I'm so thankful something in me told me to wait. If I'd spoken at Day of Dialogue any other year, even a year ago, you would have seen a completely different person. In 8th grade, I realized I was gay. I'd never considered my attraction to girls as something more than admiration until I was 13, and had never questioned why I never had a crush on a boy. I realized the quote-unquote friend crush I had on a girl in the 6th grade was more than me just looking up to the cool older girl who liked punk music and had dyed blue hair. For so long, it was like uncomfortably trying to force a puzzle piece in the wrong place. About halfway through 8th grade, I began talking with a person I'd met online through a TV show we both liked. During one of our first conversations, they asked me my pronouns. I'd never been asked this before, and I was at first confused yet very intrigued when they told me they used they-them pronouns. I thought it seemed like the coolest thing. I had no idea it was an option to identify as neither male nor female. I wanted to try singular they pronouns for myself, but I told no one, mainly because of my fear of no one understanding. I came out as gay during my freshman year. I never got to officially come out to my parents. They found out through an Instagram account I ran where I'd rant about hating school, talk about shows and movies I'd watch, and my crush. Even though I had to deactivate the account for obvious reasons, they were still nothing but understanding and accepting. My mom still jokes that she knew I was gay around the time I began hanging up Lady Gaga posters in my room while other girls were hanging up boy band posters. Aside from my parents knowing, I told a few close friends, but that was it. I posted a status on Facebook and hoped for the best, and the positive responses became overwhelming. I came out as non-binary halfway through sophomore year. The idea of being a girl was becoming something so flimsy and confusing to me, and I got into a point where I was just so frustrated trying to be a perfect, pretty girl. I told a few friends I wanted to be referred to with they-them pronouns, but kept it on the low for a long while because of my repetitive anxiety over being judged. On the first day of junior year, during my first period, my teacher asked everyone to introduce themselves and include their pronouns and a fact about themselves. The second I'd said my pronouns were they, them, theirs, heads turned my way, and I immediately panicked to myself. This was at a time where I was more female-presenting than I am now, and I felt extremely alienated. I knew I was non-binary, but I felt I had to alter myself to make others more comfortable. Thankfully, this was the school year I began going to more local Boston music shows and DIY spaces and basements, and making friends with rad and slightly older musicians and showgoers, many of who were also trans or gender non-conforming. This was the year I met my best friends, started playing solo shows here and there, and the year I gained hope. Closer to the end of junior year, my gender dysphoria was getting the best of me. I got into a point where I'd been misgendered so often it constantly made me feel like crying, and I'd had a falling out with my best friend since I was 3 because she refused to use my pronouns. So I shaved my head. This didn't magically make everything better, but for the majority of the summer after junior year, I've been called a young man and sir by complete strangers. This felt 10 times better than automatically being seen as a girl. Now I'm in my senior year. I'm still very often seen as a girl by the public, but over time it's gotten easier. I've surrounded myself with loved ones who I know won't misgender me and very slowly started to build up the courage to correct people. It's all been a long and rocky process, but I'm glad to be where I am and who I am today, no longer trying to fit in or reshape myself. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Malcolm Cawthorn, and it is an honor to be in front of you today. I use the pronouns he, him, his. I am not an ally. I want to be. I'd like to think I am. But I know I can and should be better. In support for LGBTQIA+ issues. Today I ask the heterosexual, cisgender males to be better than I am, and especially better than I was as a BHS student. I knew better, but I wasn't strong enough to do what I knew was right. I am hoping today I can convince some of you to be stronger, more courageous, and better than me. My father's best friend was gay. I always knew he was gay. I don't have a childhood memory before Bill. Bill was always in my life. He was important in my life. His daughters are my family, my sisters, and I have always thought of them that way. One time when I was old enough to understand what it meant to be gay, I asked my father, how could Bill be gay? He had children. My father looked at me and said, gay people want to have families too, Malcolm. It was a simple response, and I understood it. Bill always challenged me to think beyond the obvious. When I was hurt and couldn't play sports in high school, he would call and joke and assure me that everything was going to be okay. I found out that Bill was a really good basketball player and track athlete in high school. This should have been enough to shatter my stereotypical image of gay men, but it didn't. I found out his injuries got him focused in school and on his academics, and ultimately his love for making films. Bill came over one day, my senior year, to show me and my siblings a documentary about sexually transmitted infections. He wanted to make it for high school kids, to know the truth about sex and the realities of AIDS in the 1980s. When I tell you this was a scary time, I cannot stress that enough. AIDS was called an epidemic, the gay cancer, the gay plague. I had parents, teachers, and Bill to explain the science behind AIDS. He wanted kids to know there was a way to beat the scariness and the ugliness that was on the news. That it also made it socially okay, inappropriately okay, to deflect that scariness and ugliness towards the gay male community. That would be the last time I saw Bill. At the end of my freshman year of college, my father called me to say Bill had died. I didn't really know he was sick. He had died of AIDS. I remember seeing his daughters, Keisha and Maika, my family, my sisters, at his memorial. I remember Keisha imploring me to never take the time with my father for granted. I remember Maika and I hugging. And I'm not sure who was holding the other one up more, but I know I needed her. I needed her embrace in that moment. And I hope I was there for her. She is my family. I tell this story because I still ignored the homophobic remarks when I was in high school and in college. But I knew better. I had and have friends who would have listened to me in those moments. But I wasn't an ally. I had and have friends I know were hurt by jokes, by comments, and by the people who would not address those homophobic actions. I had opportunities to speak with friends, to those who weren't friends. I know that most of these folks would have listened had I spoken up. People would have known not to do or say those things around me. But I was a coward. I had better examples than that. I had a father who showed me how to be an ally. I failed him. I failed Bill. I've been better as a teacher. I'm protective of all my students. And I know I've made mistakes. I've been better as a parent. When my daughters found out their classmates or friends had two moms or anything that wasn't the traditional story of a family, they always thought it was cool. Just different. Like we were different. Because we had actually lived in Iowa. but I still owe a debt to be an ally. I owe Bill more. I owe him all the care, concern, and love he always showed me. I love Bill. I miss him. I owe my parents more. They taught me to speak up for those who couldn't. They taught me to speak up for what is right instead of what is popular or easy. They taught me to respect others for who they are, not what they are. And so I ask you today, students of BHS, to be better than me. As a cisgender and heterosexual man, I need to speak up. I ask my students, my colleagues, and all of those connected to my alma mater, I ask you to be better than I have been. I'm hoping that some of you will realize that you can begin your path to alliance today. I am hoping that you will recognize the power of your voice long before I did. I am hoping you will join me in the work to be the ally we all need to be. Thank you.
We would like to once again thank everyone who was brave enough to share their stories today. Can we get them a big round of applause again? At this point, B block is almost over, and we would like to invite everyone to go to their normal A block class and have an important discussion about allyship, which is demonstrated by Mr. Cawthorn's most recent speech. Thank you.
Welcome to the Day of Dialogue. My name is Emma, and I use any pronouns.
And my name is Haley, and I use she, her, hers. We're co-facilitators of the Brookline GSA.
Before we begin, we are asking everyone to turn off their cell phones. We are streaming this presentation into classrooms, and cell phones will interrupt streaming. Thank you.
Throughout today's Day of Dialogue, there have been presentations on a wide variety of issues in the LGBTQ community. We encourage you to stop by our tables outside the auditorium to buy merchandise and to get more information about the GSA. We meet on Wednesdays after school in room 309, and both members of the LGBTQ community and allies are welcome.
But before we get started, we have a little interactive activity for you all to try out. If everyone could please stand up.
We did, right? Whatever, okay. Okay, so we're gonna read off a list of names, and if you do not know, if you hear a name that you do not know, please sit down quietly.
So let's start with the practice round. Barack Obama. Sit down if you don't know who he is. It's fine if you don't. Later there will be more people sitting. But let's start for real this time. If you sat down, please stand up again.
Okay, now that we all get the gist, let's begin.
Ellen DeGeneres.
Adam Rippon.
Harvey Milk.
Oh. Sally Ride. What the hell? Oh, okay. We were expecting more of us to be familiar with these white queer people. but let's try another round anyway.
Janelle Monáe.
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay. It's fine. Oh, she's so pretty. Okay. Lorraine Hansberry.
Yeah. Baird Rustin.
Barbara Jordan.
I just like you to take a moment and look around you and see how few people are still standing.
The point of this activity is to, if you're still standing, you can sit down. Okay, the point of this activity was to raise awareness of intersectionality. Many of us weren't familiar with the people who were listed, that were people of color and LGBTQ. For example, Bayard Rustin. He organized the March on Washington, and he was one of MLK's mentors, and he also happened to be gay. And if you're interested in learning more about Bayard Rustin, there is a race reels tonight that you can go to.
But for members of any marginalized community, when your history is left out, you are left out, hidden and excluded. We need to learn more about intersectionality at BHS because it is important for us to acknowledge that not all students are given the same advantages in life.
Kimberly Crenshaw, the woman who coined the term, defines intersectionality as, quote, analytic sensibility, a way of thinking about identity and its relationship to power. She says intersectionality draws attention to invisibilities that exist in feminism, in anti-racism, and in class politics, end quote.
This is a video explaining it a little bit more.
Women of color from a multiplicity of perspectives. Intersectionality is a term we often hear, but what does it mean? Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term in 1989, explains it with a metaphor.
Consider an intersection made up of many roads. The roads are the structures of race, gender identity, class, sexuality, disability, and the traffic running through those roads are the practices and policies that discriminate against people. Now, if an accident happens, it can be caused by cars traveling from any number of directions, and sometimes from all of them. So if a black woman is harmed because she is in an intersection, her injury could result from discrimination from any or all directions.
Intersectionality in all discussions of the rights of African American women today is built on the work of previous generations who have always been a part of the fight for full equality.
Our guest speaker today is Reverend Irene Monroe. She will share with us some of her stories as a female reverend as well as an African American lesbian. We ask that the Reverend come to speak because when we tell people's stories, we assert that they exist, are important, and have dignity.
The Reverend Monroe is an ordained minister. She does work on several podcasts and radio shows such as NPR and WGBH, and has done columns for papers such as the Huffington Post and Boston Globe. Her work is focused on the role that religion plays in the LGBTQ community. She has also been given numerous awards, and in 1998, Monroe was the first African American lesbian to be bestowed the honor of being Grand Marshal in the Boston Pride Parade. Ladies and gentlemen, Reverend Irene Monroe. Oh, no.
Good morning. I felt like I was the oldest person in the room because I was the only one left standing. Before, did someone say, yeah, I am? That's okay. That's okay. Before I start, I want to say a little bit about the importance of this day here. So we celebrate MLK Day, and we know that his birthday is somewhere in January because we take that day off. But this is an important day, too, because this is the day he left. This is the day that he was assassinated. It is 51 years today that MLK was assassinated. And what he fought for while he died, what he fought for is very much is what I'm seeing here today in this assembly, that is to allow us to be who we are. I appreciate the introduction that we got here from the co-conveners Because one of the things that we think of is that we think of things, as the quotes say, in a very singular way. It's almost like you can only be black, but you can't be black and female and queer and religious. Or if you're white, you know, it doesn't raise those kind of questions. But back in the sort of second phase of the womanist movement was always this question about which is a greater oppression, being black, and they would look at me knowing clearly what Crenshaw talked about. Here I am at this intersection, and people would ask, which is a greater oppression, being black, being female, or being queer? So I want to share an example, a couple examples from my life of how I kind of wrestled with the issue of intersectionality long before we had language for it. So I went to undergraduate school at Wellesley, which is a couple of miles from here, and it was an all-women's college. And so I didn't know I was a lesbian until after graduation, which is really unfortunate. But for a whole lot of reasons, But, you know, hey, there are a couple of things. I say, well, I'm a slow bloomer if I bloomed at all. Or as some of my friends would say, oh, Irene is just stuck on stupid. But that nonetheless here, the point is that I had no idea. And largely, a lot of that had to do with the fact of a lack of representation. I didn't see lesbians, I didn't see black lesbians on campus. So when I graduated, my boyfriend said to me, and yes, I did have a boyfriend. Those are the days of what I call compulsory heterosexuality. You have a boyfriend because everybody back in the day had a boyfriend. I never knew of the kind of coupling that was allowed where you could have two women and two men sort of walk the streets hand in hand. And also, I need to say, given my age, if I had dared do something such as that, it would have been rather dangerous to do so. But in any event here, I remember this whole notion of how we sort of compartmentalize our identity of being one or the other. So I remember saying to my boyfriend, I said, you know what? I think I might be a lesbian. And he said, oh no, you can't. He said, oh no, you can't be that. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, you know, you went to an all-women's college. Well, I understand that. You know, it's like going to prison. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. I didn't experience, you know, Wellesley as prison, but okay. But anyway, when I graduate and I'm home now back in Brooklyn, I say to him, I says, well, you know, I still think I'm a lesbian. He says, oh, no, you can't possibly be. And I'm saying, well, why is that? And he says, well, because you're black. And that's the only thing that I could agree with, that yes, I am black, and then it's this whole notion you can't be black and queer. So, and that is a struggle that I even deal with today. How do you be black and queer? And God knows, don't add religion up in there, because then people lose their righteous mind. They really do. So I'll give you an example here. When I wanted to apply to seminary, I got this call, and I need to tell you, so I had decided, like, you know, if I'm going to apply to seminary, let me apply to a black seminary. Reason why? Who could best teach me about the black church other than a black seminary? So I applied to two. I applied to Howard Theological Seminary down in D.C., and I also applied to ITC, which is Interdenominational Theological Seminary. And I remember getting a call from the admissions office, and they said to me, they said, you know, you got one of the top applications coming in for the incoming class. And so I'm excited because I'm thinking, wow, this must mean I'm going to get a whole lot of financial aid because I ain't got no money. Okay, so I know they're going to be doing me well. But in any event, they said to me, they said, well, we got a problem with your application. And I said, really? And they said, yeah. They said that you say you're a lesbian. And I said, yeah, well, yeah, I am. And they said, well, there are a couple of things here. They said, well, we don't have any lesbians at you know, in our seminary. And I said, really? I said, no, that can't. I said, really? And I remember I was talking to a woman, and she said to me, she said, well, no, we don't. We don't have any lesbians, and we don't want you coming recruiting. And so I said to her, I said, I couldn't do anything if my gaydar went off and I spotted two or three of them. And she then said to me something like, well, again, you need to know, you have to make a decision. Your sort of acceptance is really predicated on the notion, on the understanding that you will come here and not recruit homosexuals, because back then they didn't even say lesbian. And then I said, well, trying to sort of throw in a bit of levity into a very difficult moment, I said to the woman, I said, well, I don't mind being the demo dyke, because I'm sure that for every first woman walking into a seminary, first black person walking into a white space, you always are the sort of token, the sort of demo person here. And I said, well, I don't mind being the demo dyke. She didn't find that to be funny. So needless to say here, in less than a week, I got my rejection notice here. And so again, these are places where you don't allow the sort of people's real lives to reflect who they are. I remember when I was at Wellesley, I said, you know, when I think about it, and this was really retrospect, because I kept saying, well, there were no lesbians at Wellesley. And then I said, oh, yes, they were. Oh, yeah. And then I think of this person, I said, yeah, she too. Oh, yeah, that one too. You know, and me too, when I look back at that, right? And so then I had this classification for lesbians. So these are words to sort of add to your queer lexicon. So at Wellesley, as I could understand, there were really, you know, two types of lesbians. There were lugs, okay, and there were lags, okay? So a lug was a lesbian until graduation. Now, we used to jokingly say that about Hillary Clinton, but after she lost the election, we don't make any jokes about it anymore. But the point about it is that, yeah, okay. And then there was people like me who fall into what I call the lags. Those are lesbians after graduation. And much of that had to do also with the climate. So, you know, I'm in school at a time that there's no such thing as someone being out and gay, being queer. And certainly we didn't have what we have now. You know, so back in the day, you either straight and then everybody was in the closet. But we didn't even have in the queer lexicon, we didn't have the word bisexual, because it was the whole notion that if you were bisexual, you really was a fence sitter, that you really was either gay or lesbian, but you wanted heterosexual privilege. And we didn't have the word transgender, because it was the whole notion that gender was not a fluid category. To be quite honest, we thanks to certainly a younger generation coming out and being who they are, no one ever thought that not only could gender not be fluid, but didn't understand that sexuality could be fluid. So it disrupted something that certainly my generation felt terribly boxed in, which is you disrupted the binary. You're either one or the other. And the pronouns, there was no such thing as, you know, they, their, and them to define a singular person here. So what happens with that is that when you don't allow people to be who they are, then you have what you call a sort of a underground culture, you know, living on the down low. So let me tell you how that impacted the African American community. Living on the down low, not allowed to be LGBTQIA. And we've always been, we've always had, you know, this particular population of folks, particularly in the black community, and certainly in the black church, because one of the things I always say, you could not have the kind of music that you have in the black church if you didn't have your queer community. When we think about our music, now how many of you go to church or synagogue or mosque? Oh, shame on so few of you. Shame, shame. But in any event, those of you who do, I'm sure when you look at who is your music ministry. Now, I'm not saying that about all of them. But a good number of them are bring the music, bring a kind of special gift, which is really unfortunate for the United Methodist Church, because just recently they had a General Assembly that has denied the ordination of LGBTQ people. But, you know, one of the things that happened, and I'll tell you, in the 80s, now this tells you how old I am, really. Okay, in the 80s, we had the AIDS epidemic, and it was going on in such a way that people weren't even naming it. They were calling it GRID, and then finally in 1987, we had a name for it, which was called AIDS. And the interesting thing about that is that it impacted the black community very greatly. And the news was that long before the CDC said that the new face of HIV/AIDS would be a black heterosexual woman, those of us living in black communities definitely got to see that. And so what happens is that when you don't allow folks to be who they are, other types of problems will exist in a community. Let me tell you about the civil rights movement. So the co-conveners introduced you to Bayard Rustin. And you know, the very interesting thing is that there would have been no March on Washington in 1963 were it not for Bayard Rustin. But because of the virulent form of homophobia, he had to be closeted. And he didn't have a speaking role. And he really wasn't out really until way after basically King had passed away, because it was the whole notion among many of the other black ministers that if King was associated with Bayard Rustin, that he too would be considered queer. So this is the kind of things that happens when we show a lack of tolerance and not allowing people to be who they are. One of the things that has really helped us to sort of be who we are is the Stonewall riots. And this year, this June, will mark the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots. But you know, as I was coming along, and I just want to know, do you have GSA here? Yeah, that wasn't even a possibility when I was coming along. We didn't have PFLAG. Do you know what PFLAG is? Okay, someone yell it out. PFLAG. Okay, Greg, do you know what GLSEN is? No? Okay, GLSEN, okay. Thank you for being so candid here and stuff. GLSEN was one of the most important organizations we had back in the 80s here, and that was Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. And it was the nation's largest advocacy for us, reaching public school kids from K to 12 here. And another thing, you know, when I was growing up that didn't exist, so 1998 was one of the worst years really in terms of LGBT issues here. And do you know, have you heard of Matthew Shepard? Okay, what about James Byrd? No, not quite? All right, well, so June of 1998, James Byrd from a town called Jasper, Texas, was lynched, and it's called dragging by lynching. And he was killed simply because he was a black man. And then that same year, but in October, in a town called Laramie, Wyoming, a gay boy by the name of Matthew Shepard was killed simply because he was gay. So in 2009, Obama signed a bill, and it's called the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Hate Crime Prevention Bill. I say this because this is very, very important, because those people who dared to live out their lives with authenticity, often the repercussions, it cost them their lives. And there was no hate crime bill to protect you. And so things have really improved a lot, so much since the time that I was coming up. But that when there is improvement, there's always a backlash. So I want to talk a little bit about the backlash, because I'm hoping that those of you who are voting age or soon will be voting age will definitely vote. Because one of the things about civil rights here is that it doesn't come easy. You cannot take it for granted. And if you don't continue to fight for it, it will go away. So, for instance here, the Supreme Court, I don't know if you know about Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado, but it was the whole idea of a gay couple coming in and wanted to have this bakery bake a cake for them. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the man won because he said because of religious freedom here. Since Donald has taken office, there's been an erosion of LGBTQ rights, really under the guise of religious freedom. And it's called Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And you know, sometimes our worst enemies are people who are in our own camp. And I'll give you an example of this. Do many of you know Martina Navratilova, tennis great? Well, she's a lesbian woman, but you know, one of the isms in our community is this fight with transgendered people. And her argument was that trans women had a particular advantage in that they weren't real women. So this is all to say here that while we try to live out loud, it's important to have a kind of intersectional approach. It's that it's not enough for me just to be fighting about racism. I have to be fighting about racism, sexism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. Because as King said this, what affects one affects us all. Thank you very much. Okay, so you could tell them.
So we're going to do some questions for the Reverend. Does anybody have a question?
Oh, we can see better. Then, as they say, then there was light. All right. Oh, you want to bring the mic? I don't think it'll pass. Okay, can I have your attention? Unfortunately, you didn't hear a very good question, so I'm going to try to paraphrase, and you'll help me, okay? This extension cord doesn't extend terribly long. In any event, the question was, what has been people's reaction to me in the religious community and don't take LGBT folks seriously, right? Something more or less, no, well, say it again, I'm sorry. Now, listen, now that we got everybody quiet, stand up and say it again, please. Yeah, okay, so let me answer this. So did everybody sort of hear this question? Sort of, kind of? Okay, so how they respond to me? Well, they certainly have cognitive dissonance. Okay, definitely they look like, how could that be? But there are a couple of things I say. First of all, I say that gay people love Jesus just as much as straight people. Now, if I was in a black church, I'd get like amen, amen, at least from the choir, if nobody else from the church here. Okay, then I kind of remind people, because people will make all kinds of stuff up. They will say, well, it says in the book of, you know, and they'll make up a book, okay, the Book of Liberty, that Jesus said that homosexuality is a sin, okay? Okay, make up all kinds of stuff up in here. And so there are a couple of things I do. So with a black community, with a black audience, I do this. In the Bible, okay, there are damning and damaging verses that talks about racism. For instance, American slavery was, one of the sanctions of American slavery was the Bible. One of which is the curse of Ham, and the second one is where Apostle Paul says that slaves ought, and that's in the Ephesian text for anybody who want to look that up, that Apostle Paul says that slaves ought to be obedient to their slave masters. Well, no black person in their right mind, okay, then and now is going to uphold that particular scripture. Now, see, that's an amen. Just say amen. Okay, okay. Listen, and no woman, okay, Apostle Paul also says this, that women ought to be subservient to their husbands. Come on, women up in here, okay? Amen. This ain't happening. Okay, okay. This is not happening. So the question that it brings here are two things. One is that we use certain scriptures over and against another. Why is that? Number two, they said that Apostle Paul, if you read the biblical text, had a thorn in his side. The boy was gay, okay? The other thing is, when we talk about Jesus, Jesus never said anything about homosexuality. But the statistics is, as you remember, if anybody knows the narrative, he had 13 disciples, right? Right? Or if not, just nod so I know you're not asleep. Okay, 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 okay. All right. Well, anyway, the law of averages is that 1 in 10 people are gay. Okay, so the point is that something is suspect and queer about Jesus and those disciples. But you know, because queer in its literal sense, queer as we understand it. But what I want to get at the Bible is this, that when we talk about the Bible, see, that becomes a problematic text. It can become a text of terror, because one of the things that happens in the Bible, even in Genesis, you have two creation stories. One of the stories, the very first story, says that we were made from humanity, that God made humanity. But the second story is the rib story. That rib story is the one that we all remember, that a woman derives from the rib of a man. And that particular story has ribbed women in terms of gender inequity even to this day. Even to this day, we do not get equal pay to what men get. So it's suspect why, even though we say that there is a separation between church and state, why we uphold certain passages and don't uphold others. Did I answer your question? You know, I'm long-winded, honey. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Because, you know, I feel like I'm on the pulpit now. But did I answer your question? Okay, good enough. Okay, somebody else here. Come on, work with me, people. Okay, come on.
What is your favorite story from the Bible for any reason?
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Well, okay, now, my favorite story is the Song of Solomon, because that is a love story. It's erotic. I read it and go, oh, suck it now. Okay? Yes, indeed. And I advise you to read it too. Okay? It is the Song of Solomon. Okay? And it's a love story. And it's salacious. It's wet. It's steamy. Woo, child. Yes, it is. All right. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
So, how did your family and friends react when you came out and when you said you wanted to be a minister, and like that's pretty unconventional of the time for like.
Well, a good number of them lost their righteous mind, okay? A good many of them, because the thing is that, so I'll tell you, when I was at Wellesley, I really wasn't what you call that typical Wellesley student, because the Wellesley girls study, and they would be double majors. So I was a double major too. My double major was party with a minor in protest. So when I go to my class reunion, my 10th reunion, and I'm gonna be very honest, those girls graduated, they graduated summa cum laude, magna cum laude, cum laude, and when they called my name, I just said, thank you, Lord, because girl, I was just not that kind of student. But, the point is that I do come out of the black church. I do like activism. I tell people, even today, even on a bad day, I'm still a minister. you know. So the point is that, you know, you follow your passion. And that's the important thing that I can say to you all. Follow your passion. Now, how I got here, only God knows, because I was living for the weekend. That's all I got to tell you. But all I got to say is that you bring all your hedonistic experiences. You know, it really makes you a better pastor, because when they say, you know, I done that, I said, well, I done that and been there. You're going to be all right. Come on now. Okay, next one. See, you can come and confess to me, because ain't nothing you can tell me that I haven't probably done myself. So it's all good. See, so I don't judge. Okay, I just try to change behavior.
Have you ever thought about being a comedian?
You know, okay, well, can I just, let me say this about that, okay? I just think that if you in the field of religion, probably politics too, you need a sense of humor, honey, because some of this stuff just don't make no kind of sense. And the way that people handle it, okay, make you crazy. Please.
What was it like being Pride Marshal?
Oh, it was quite wonderful. I was the first African American and woman to be Pride Marshal. It was very, very good. Thank you very much, really. I was honored by it, because, so let me just say this. So when I was doing my doctorate at Harvard Divinity School, I really had to think of it in a creative way. And this is the wonderful thing that your generation is provided, that you don't have to be in the box about doing anything that you want to do. So I had to think about doing church differently. And the reason for that is that LGBTQ people didn't feel welcome at church. So my whole, you know, so I had to think about doing and making theology accessible. And I had to make them understand that they were not of a lesser God, really. And so what I did was I wrote a column in the Gay Rag. It was about meeting people where they were. So I started writing in a gay rag here, you know, in Boston, and then it became syndicated, really. So that's the step. If you take one step, you never know how that will blossom. And so I got to be known in the community, because they would say, here's this black minister, okay, and she's gay, and she talks about an inclusive ministry. And we were hurting. There was the AIDS epidemic here. It's interesting, because at that time we were fighting for our service men and women, you know, to be included in the military. More of our educators were, you know, coming out. We could adopt children. And so it was one of those things that it was a culminating moment, and I cried all through the route, honey. They would say, hi, they say, Irene, I go, oh, yes. It's such a great moment. I really enjoyed it, although I cried through the entire route. Oh, and another thing I have to tell you that I thought was a great moment. I cried through this, too, because I was very active in the marriage equality moment. I'm going to be honest with you. Never doubt the impossible. There are two things that I thought was just totally impossible, okay? I just said that I would never in my lifetime ever see an African-American president, and I did. I said that in my life, I would never see same-sex marriage. And I did. And I particularly felt that that would not happen, because when Baby Bush was running for president, okay, to this day, I don't like that boy. But because he ran on an LGBT hate platform, so much so that a lot of the southern states were amending their constitution to say that marriage was between one man and a woman. And so you know what I'm optimistic about? Because just as I couldn't imagine gay marriage or a black president, I'm imagining now a gay president, and his name is Pete Buttigieg. Okay. All right, any more questions? Okay, I'm so sorry. I can't hear. All right. Okay, he said moving forward. I'm going to just say it word by word. Is that okay? Okay, moving forward.
What do you think?
Oh.
Hi.
Oh, there you are.
I have a good job projecting.
Oh, okay, there you go.
What do you think would be of the best or the biggest benefit culturally or politically for the LGBTQ community in America?
Okay, what would be best now at this moment?
Yeah,
here?
like what do you think would have the biggest positive effect?
In the political climate?
Sure.
Okay, well, one of the things is that transgender bills across the country, that's for sure. Allowing our trans members to serve this country. They love this country just as much as straight people. But the objective too is that while we do our work in our community, we also have to make alliances outside our community, and that's where the intersectional approach comes here. Okay, because even if we do one focus around transgendered issues here, we got to understand that transgendered issues is a multi-pronged issue, because being black and trans is very, very different than being white and trans. And even transitioning from male to female is very different from you know, in terms of what is accessible to you, what's not accessible here. But you know, it's kind of like this, that the person that is most marginal is the place where you make your alliance. Because if that person can enter, then everybody else enters. So we got to do that. We got to allow our proud trans servicemen and women to serve this country here. And so, but we also got to work with issues of really demarginalizing race in this country. I mean, it's so multi-pronged. We got to deal with Islamophobia, definitely here. And that's something that would change it. But I have to say this is how, you know, we always want to do something really, really great here. But this is how things really change. You always got to start at home here, okay? So for instance, like when I'm talking to an all-white audience, I always say to them here, I know you got great intentions here, but the work is is easier than you think, okay? Those folks whose parents voted or members in their family voted for Donald Trump, and you on the other side of the political spectrum, you got to go home and have that conversation. Because it's a family affair, okay? Because I can't go home and tell them, like, you know what, you racist, okay? They won't invite me again if I do that, okay? So I can't go there and do that. But you live in those, you know these people. And then you got to begin to look at spaces you occupy. Is this space multicultural? Do you have, you know, teachers of color here? Have the community that this place, meaning Brookline High, does it have a relationship in such a way that it's welcoming to have people of color even move in this neighborhood? So it's stuff like that that really, you know, creates a kind of paradigm shift. It really does. And as you're doing that, you got to continue to think, as I'm doing this, who might be left out? Who might be left out here and stuff? So that's the kind of stuff. I mean, we're seeing now anti-Semitism in a way that we've never, you know, seen it in decades here. That's a problem. We got to address that. So when we're talking about white supremacy, we got to talk about the various tentacles that it certainly clings on to, the type of isms it clings on. I'm long-winded. You know, I'm sorry. Just talk to me after. Okay. Any others? Oh, there's one up there. Oh, hi, balcony. All right. Yeah, let me wave to you. Okay. Okay, so they're balcony people. Come on. Wait. Okay, someone from the balcony. Okay, I think I see someone. All right, I see a hand up. I got the microphone. Yeah. Okay, you see me like I see you? Okay, yeah. Okay. Okay, shh. We got somebody in the balcony. The person is standing, and then I'll get the other person. Okay. Okay, what's that last part? Well, you mean the kind of infighting? Okay, well, I give you a classic example of infighting within various communities. So Pride here at Boston. Have you noticed how lily white that is? Yep, yep. Okay, you know, Pride brings out the fault line not only along race, but along class and gender and culture here. So one of the things is that, you know, Pride is a wonderful moment because it shows the various people in our community, and we in many ways show the dominant culture what it is to be diverse, and how our struggle is very much an American struggle here. But Pride being what it is, it's a segregated parade. It is just astonishing to me that here we are all fighting for the same thing, and we can't even march together. Okay, and it's not just, you know, endemic, you know, to Boston. It's pandemic because you'll see it across the country. You'll even see it in Montreal. So we have a problem with race. So can I talk to you about race? Okay. Let's talk about race here. We got a problem with race. Okay. We got a really bad problem with race, okay? So I need this. So this is how we need to deal with white supremacy, okay? Because I assume everybody in many ways want to dismantle that so that we never see what we saw the summer of 2017 in Charlottesville. Do you remember that? Here? Yep, absolutely here. So one of the things is, and how much time do I have here? 3 minutes. All right, well, I may not be able to get to this, but this is what I want to do. Those of you who define yourself as white, now this is what I mean. Listen, you define yourself as white. Just show me your hands. Okay, you define yourself as white. Okay, there's a whole lot of white people up in this audience, even though I can't even see. Okay, this is what you got to do. This is what you got to do. Not only do you have to talk to members in your family, I want to leave you with 2 questions, okay? So if you want to write it down, that's fine. Or if you got great memory, that too is fine. The question is this: how are you white, okay? Okay? And how white are you, all right? Now, that sounds funny, but how are you white? It's about privilege, okay? I want you to hear this. How are you white? It's about privilege. How white are you? I'll give you this here, a quick example, because I only got a couple of minutes left here. I'm asking you, when did you get your white card? When did the Irish become white? When did the Italians become white? When did the Jews become white? Because what I'm saying to you is that when we talk about ethnicity, we think of people of color. And if you do not know your history, not only it makes you dangerous, you cannot be an ally in the struggle towards an intersectional approach, as well as dismantling racism. Now, racism works like this. It is not the province of just white people, because we have black people or people of color who also espouse a white ideology, a white supremacist ideology, all right? I'll give you an example of 2 black-white supremacists, okay? One of them is Clarence Thomas. And the reason why I say that is because he can affect policy. The other black-white supremacist is Ben Carson. So the point is that it is not the province. White people are not the only people that have a problem with white supremacy. It is an ideology. And so that's the kind of work that you have to begin to do. I see your hand up. Okay, just ask me. Go ahead.
What makes Clarence Thomas and Ben Carson white supremacists?
Well, what makes them white supremacists? Because they have policy. And you know what? The very policies and civil rights acts that elevated Clarence Thomas to the highest office in this land in terms of our judicial system are the very things that he's dismantling here. For example, affirmative action, you know, things that all the rungs on the ladder that got him to where he is on the Supreme Court, he wants to dismantle here. So that's why I say it's a kind of, well, doggone it, the court likes me. Okay. That's the kind of thing in terms of we have to understand that it's an ideology. You just can't look at skin color. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. A big thank you to Reverend Irene Monroe for joining us today. Should we even do this part? Let's not do the Okay. So just while you're packing up to leave, we want to leave you with some prompts to think about. So what parts of your identity are you most aware of? If it's race, nationality, gender, religion, sexuality, any of it, which ones affect you the most? What are we doing? Next slide. Go to the next one.
No?
Oh, okay, whatever. That's
Okay.
fine.
Remember to check out the display in the atrium and the stand in front of the auditorium to purchase GSA merchandise and show support for our community. And follow our Instagram at Brookline_GSA.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last big panel of this year's Day of Dialogue. Before we begin, we are asking you all to please turn off your cell phones. I have not turned mine off yet because that's where the script is, but I will, I swear. Because we're streaming this in classrooms, and well, as you guys have probably heard it like several times before, cell phones will probably interrupt the streaming. And we want it to go as smoothly as possible. Yep, I'm just going to give you time to do that. Have you done it yet? Liars. Do it. Okay. So throughout today's Day of Dialogue, presentations on a wide variety of issues affecting the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, LGBTQ+ community at large were held. And we hope that you have and will continue to learn, share, and have an important dialogue. I'm sorry, about all of them. We encourage you to stop by our tables outside the auditorium to buy merchandise and to get more information about the GSA. We meet on Wednesdays after school in room 309, and both members of the LGBTQ community and allies are welcome. So, you know, come. Join us. So now we're going to start the final panel of the day, telling our stories. In this assembly, students and teachers will share their stories and experiences relating to their history being part of or an ally of the LGBTQ+ community. And the first person to speak will be Rebecca Perez. Is that how you pronounce it? Yeah! Give it up!
Hi guys, how do I sound? Good? Can you all hear me? Okay, awesome. Hi, my name is Rebecca Perez. I'm a senior and I've come out 3 times. First as bisexual back in 2015, then as gay in 2016, and then as bisexual again in 2018. What you might think based on that is that I made a mistake coming out as gay, since I later took it back. But to be honest, I have absolutely no regrets about any of my coming out experiences. Though I've been a member of GSA for 4 years and have every year helped with the planning of Day of Dialogue, it never occurred for me to speak before, mostly because I didn't feel like I had a lot to talk about. My self-discovery process wasn't finished yet. I was still struggling with the questions of who do I want to be and how do I want to be that person. So how could I give anyone else advice on how to go through it? However, standing up in front of you all today, I can't say that I figured it all out, that I'm 100% comfortable in my skin and 100% sure of my sexuality. The reason I'm up here is because I'm finally okay with not knowing any of that stuff. I've come to realize that the path to self-discovery is not a journey to a single destination, but rather a series of stages that you'll continue to pass through your whole life. And each stage is just as much a part of you as any other. Who I was then does not invalidate who I am now, and who I am now does not invalidate who I was then. The Rebecca that had short hair and identified as gay is the real me, and the Rebecca that wears lipstick and is bi and is trying to grow out her hair is the real me too. I found when I first came out that I would try to distance myself from who I used to be because it didn't fit the new label I'd adopted. And I think this whole becoming who you're meant to be idea, that your identity is static and that you've always been this way and always will be, can be a really unhealthy one. I think it puts a lot of pressure on the already scary coming out experience. The idea that once you come out, you can never take it back. I waited a ridiculously long time to come out because I was so afraid of irreversibly changing everything in my life. the way my parents and my friends saw me, and the way I saw myself. Much of my identity was built on my sexuality, so when I realized I wasn't gay, I was afraid of coming out a third time. I was afraid of not being taken seriously, and I was afraid that coming out again would force me to change who I was. Because of this fear, I hid the crush that I had on my friend for months, hoping it was just momentary. It wasn't. But eventually, I decided to trust my feelings, and I've never looked back. I confessed my feelings to my friend, and he reciprocated. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost a year now, and it's been some of the best... Thank you. And it's been some of the best months of my life. My friends and family had no problem with my change in label, and I know now it was definitely worth it. Looking back on it, while coming out did change me, I'm still the same person that I was before I came out all 3 times. Except I'm more confident, have more friends, am in an awesome relationship with someone I love, and I'm a lot happier. So to all the folks out there who might at this moment be questioning their own identity, my advice would be, don't doubt your feelings. Because I spent a long time trying to repress my own feelings, and ultimately they always come to the surface anyway. I was scared that coming out would put me into a box forever, but really it has opened an entire world of self-exploration and discovery. Based on that experience, I've also come to believe that labels don't always fit or define me, and that I can't expect them to. It can be really comforting when you're questioning your sexuality to find a label that feels like it explains why you've been feeling what you're feeling. But that label can't tell you how to look, how to dress, and most importantly, it can't tell you who you are. I didn't come out as bisexual one day and immediately feel like all of my uncertainties became answered. There were so many questions still facing me. How do I dress? How do I build healthy and stable relationships? What parts of the bisexual stereotypes do I embrace, and what parts do I shun? Furthermore, my labels ended up causing me a lot of stress when I realized they didn't fit. How could I like a guy when I said I was gay? Was I lying before, or were my current feelings invalid? We place so much trust in labels to tell us who we are that we can be left totally lost when we realize they don't fit. I've changed how I identify so many times that I no longer place a lot of importance in any one aspect of my identity. So if there's one takeaway I'd like you all to have from my speech, it's that you should never let yourself be defined by just one thing, whether it be a hobby, a relationship you're in, a sexual orientation. Because I promise you, you are special and important in so many ways. There are hundreds of things that make you the person you are. Losing just one of them won't change you. And I ask that you do the same for others. Your classmates, your teachers, your friends, your family. Don't diminish them to a single identity either. The theater kid, the basketball star, Ryan's girlfriend, the gay kid. Every single person I've met at BHS and beyond is so much more complex and interesting than that. And I think we all deserve to be seen for who we really are. Thank you.
Hey guys, is this good? Can y'all hear me? All right, cool. How's that? Nice. All right. Leave me alone. Hi, my name is James. I use he, him, his. You might know me as Bird, but I'm in the process of rebranding, you know? It's new, it's fresh, it's James. At age 13, I came out as non-binary. I was at my all-girls summer camp when I first tried using they-them pronouns, and I realized that not fitting in with other girls was attributed to something other than gender nonconformity. I realized that after going through puberty, I had developed mild social and body dysphoria. And dysphoria, by the way, is the disconnect between a person's sex and their gender and any discomfort or distress caused by that. But, contrary to popular belief, not everyone's dysphoria is crippling self-loathing. When I came out as non-binary, mine manifested mostly in feeling weird about my chest and not wanting to be talked about as a girl. Despite this, I still presented in a very feminine way, save for cutting my hair into a pixie cut and not wearing dresses as much. I spent a lot of time researching being transgender and looking at other trans people online, but I ended up overshooting the message of being transgender isn't something to be hated and ashamed of, and went straight into glorifying my own gender nonconformity and adopting an obnoxious holier-than-thou attitude. This was also right around the time when I finally developed feelings for boys, just not positive ones. I hated most of the boys in my life at that point because they were the opposite of what I thought I wanted to be. They were loud, they were disrespectful, they were overly and performatively masculine. But it turns out I was just surrounded by the wrong boys. At age 15, almost 2 years later, I realized that I'd been a boy the whole time. As soon as I realized and admitted my gender to myself, my dysphoria increased tenfold, and I came out immediately because I couldn't stand staying the way I was. I hated my chest, my hips, the pitch of my voice, because it all reminded me too much of a part of myself that I wanted to forget. One of the biggest changes, however, was the fact that I stopped glorifying being transgender, dropped my superiority complex, and realized the reality of my life. Being trans sucks. So much. And I didn't realize this before, because when I was non-binary, I didn't have dysphoria about the fact that I was trans. At the time, my gender became a concerningly large part of my identity, and I was very open about it. I often used it as a supplement to, actually having a good personality. When I came out as a guy, I immediately wanted nothing to do with my transgender identity. I realized that I wouldn't always have to be transgender because passing as cis was finally an option. And I pursued this desire to pass in a lot of ways. I trained my voice to be lower, I started consistently binding my chest, and most of all, I stopped being so outspoken about my gender, especially with strangers. When I was non-binary, I always introduced myself, "Hi, I'm Bird. I use they, them, theirs. What are your pronouns?" And I was annoyed when I had to correct people when they called me a girl, even though I willingly presented and acted like one. Since I came out, I've sort of started resenting being asked by pronouns. But oddly enough, this resentment is a product of my own insecurity in my gender presentation and my hatred of being visibly trans, which, in turn, stems from my years of being obnoxiously in-your-face, misgender me and face my wrath transgender. And yet here I am, being visibly trans. I deeply regret those lost 2 years of my life, and if you had to interact with me during that time, I'm so sorry. However, those 2 years were important to making me who I am, as much as I hate to admit it. Those years allowed me to get comfortable with the idea of not conforming to common gender stereotypes. As a man, I shouldn't have to give up theater and start using 3-in-1 body wash. I can be sensitive and caring, and I don't feel the need to ignore my emotions or passions for the sake of my masculinity. But at the same time, I feel weird talking about and expressing my gender, and I'm always scared that people can tell that I'm trans. It's a weird situation in terms of the good and bad that came out of it. But as much as I joke about how much of a terrible child I was during that time, I taught myself that I can be masculine and still be true to myself. And honestly, that's all that matters.
Okay. Hi. Does this work? Cool. Hi, my name is Sol, if you don't know that. I'm a sophomore and I go by they, them pronouns. I'm also very terrified right now, but anyways. When I was in 5th grade, I really, really liked my best friend. She was really pretty and nice and just the best. I liked holding her hand, and she was really nice to hug, too. And despite the various signs, it never occurred to me that I had a crush on her. Now that I think about it, it was pretty ridiculous to not notice, I mean. But back then, I thought I was going crazy. How could I possibly like a girl? My best friend at that. Besides, no one told me that it was problematic. Oh, I'm so sorry. Problematic to be gay or trans, but no one told me that it was okay either. Growing up in a Korean family in America, the mix of cultures resulted in a complicated mess for me. Although there are many Korean people with pretty open views on being queer, there are also plenty of conservative people who hate those who don't adhere to their standards. The stigma around queer people in Korea means that even in America, the topic is avoided. Thus, it was never expected that I might be anything but straight, which obviously turned out to be a completely wrong assumption if you know me at all. My family still doesn't believe I'll turn out to be anything but straight or cis. They don't even use my pronouns. So even if it wouldn't have applied to me, I wish I'd been taught how to use different pronouns from younger ages. Actually, in the 3.5 years I've been out at school, including middle school and high school, only about 5 teachers have used my correct pronouns, meaning that a little less than a third of the adults who have known me have made a conscious effort to make me feel safe and wanted. Last year, I even had some friends who outright told me that they weren't going to make the conscious effort to use my pronouns because it's too tedious, and they'd mess up anyways. But it's too hard to continuously request that they actually respect me, so now I just try to ignore it. Honestly, my life is kind of a mess right now, so as much as those kind of things stress me out, I don't have the time or energy to point out every single rude encounter. I also do know how hard it can be to change bad habits. I'm not saying that everyone who doesn't use the proper pronouns for me or other people are horrible people. What I'm trying to get at is that in my experience, no good comes from not exposing kids to anything other than cis or straight norms. After all, many adults, instead of giving kids the option of making their own decision about their identity, they expect kids to have similar views as they did growing up, often by exposure to media, and the current media is, well, ridiculously heteronormative. It's not just the media, too. The interaction between the people we see in our everyday lives, everything that we see, hear, and feel is heteronormative, or that's what I feel. Of course, being a person of color doesn't help either, since the best case scenario is usually that no one ever talks about those kind of things. Being queer seems to simply stop existing in other cultures. But I am a person of color. I am queer. I'm a student, an artist, and a friend. I am a queer student of color who happens to love painting and who happens to have many friends that I love dearly, platonically or romantically. And being all of this is really hard. Everything is interlocked in a tangled web of feelings and questions and ideas. So the decision to not remember to respect someone's identity doesn't just impact that one part of them, but their entire being as well. The decision to not teach children about the different ways one can identify impacts every part of them, of us. Kudos to everyone out there who also went through a rough time figuring things out for yourself. Either if you're straight, gay, lesbian, non-binary, a person of color, whatever it may be. So I think I'll end my speech by reminding people that by just telling kids one more thing, you'll probably make someone feel much better, be it now or in the future. My name is Sol. I use they, them pronouns. Please remember that. Thank you.
Hi, folks. My name is Kate Leslie. I'm a history teacher here and one of the 3 GSA advisors. I've been helping to plan Day of Dialogue for 10 years now, and I have yet to tell my story until today. So many people have wondered why this work is so important to me. And this speech is the answer. Why GSA? Growing up, I saw no positive representations of happy, healthy, successful LGBTQ people. I was raised in New York City in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and it was the height of the HIV/AIDS crisis. All of the gay people that I knew were dying. Danny and Andrew from church, my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Rollins, the nameless people on the TV set, they were all gay, and they all died of HIV/AIDS. Why GSA? Then in high school, my family moved across the country to the suburbs of Seattle, and I was no longer haunted by the deaths of queer people. Instead, I was haunted by the absence. I simply saw no one who was LGBTQ. There were no LGBTQ characters on TV. There were no out teachers at my school. There were no out students, and there was no GSA. To me, being LGBTQ just didn't even seem like an option. Why GSA? In college, I dated men, but I sabotaged every relationship by being overcommitted to my schoolwork. I didn't want to consider the possibility that I was gay because in my mind, gay people were weird. Gay people were lonely. Gay people couldn't have a good life. Gay people couldn't have the life that I wanted. Why GSA? My first year as a teacher, I was still in the closet. I had finally come out to myself, but I was scared to tell my students, my colleagues, and my principal. I was living and working in New Mexico, and none of the staff in my school was out. My principal was socially conservative and very religious, and there was, once again, no GSA. I feared that I could be fired if I came out. I worried that I'd lose control of behavior in my classroom. I worried that I'd be ostracized by the very teachers that I was trying to befriend. Why GSA? In my second year of teaching, the unthinkable happened. My student, Natisha Lewis, took her own life. Natisha was a star athlete, point guard for the basketball team, cross-country runner, and track superstar. She was loved by her classmates, and she had a wonderful twin sister who was her best friend. But Natisha was gay and raised in a household where she was taught that homosexuality was sinful. Natisha killed herself and only left a note explaining to all of us left behind that she couldn't live with her secret, that she would rather die than to be her authentic self. Why GSA? I am often asked by students today why I'm so public about being gay. They ask me why I come out to all of my classes, why I help to plan the day of dialogue, and why I help to advise the GSA. It's because I don't want LGBTQ kids out there to live in as much fear as I did. I don't want students to think that they are alone. I don't want to lose any more students like I lost Natisha. You can be queer and be successful. You can be queer and have a family. You can be queer and happy. My identity as a queer woman has enriched my life and made it more wonderful than I ever imagined. And that can be true of you out there too. Thank you.
In kindergarten, when we had to share about our families, I proudly stood up and said, "I have two moms." The kids in my class wore puzzled expressions at first, but shortly after had nothing but positive things to say. In kindergarten, being different wasn't ostracizing, it was accepting. Having something special about you made others want to be your friend, instead of kids singling you out as weird. Growing up, I never realized how unique my family was. In my own neighborhood alone, there were 6 same-sex couples, including my own moms, so we never stood out. I just knew some people had 2 moms, a mom and a dad, or 2 dads. The first time I began to realize that having gay parents wasn't the norm was when I heard one of the kids on my street use the word gay as an insult, probably around age 9 or 10. Why would anyone think gay is a bad word? I knew so many gay people, and all of them seemed pretty great. I figured that the word gay must also mean something else, something actually bad. When I asked my mom about it, she had to explain that what might be normal for me was actually very different for everyone else. She explained that being gay wasn't something that people always agreed with. I was too young to know why being gay was wrong to some people, but I was old enough to understand what this meant. I had to be careful with what I said around people and fear that they too might think gay equals bad. I knew from then on that people might not love my family just as much as I do. Ever since then, I became more hesitant when it came to talking about my family. It only took a few words, and suddenly I was saying my mom instead of one of my moms. Every time a new student came to our school, or I met a new kid in one of my after-school activities, I never outright said that my parents were gay. When my world grew past the tight-knit community of my neighborhood, I felt like I could never be sure how a stranger would feel about me being raised by a same-sex couple. In middle school, I started learning about the discrimination of the LGBTQ community and about how people had to fight for the right to adopt as same-sex couples. I learned about how some religions and cultures may see being LGBTQ as a sin. And with this knowledge came more and more hesitation, to the point where sometimes I would actually feel like I had to lie about who my parents were. Obviously, you can't just ask people if they're homophobic, so I started making huge and dangerous generalizations, looking for clues that might warn me of what I could and couldn't say. Clues like a cross necklace, an accent, conservative ideals. As I reflect, I realize I was stereotyping, and this way of thinking is extremely harmful and toxic, but I couldn't help it at the time. By this point, I knew what hate crimes were, and I knew that just by existing, something bad can happen to my moms or my family. I have been working on getting over this fear. I love my mom so much, and now I realize that trying to hide who I was raised by isn't fair to them and isn't fair to myself. Why should I not be able to show off just how amazing my moms are? They are two of the strongest women I know, and I couldn't be happier to be their daughter. But to be completely honest, I still have that moment's hesitation when someone asks about my family, and I think that will never go away. I'm leaving Boston in August, and I know that at college and beyond, there will be people who are homophobic and will say their opinions no matter how hurtful. But my goal is to reclaim the pride I once had as a kid, about not hiding who I am and who I love. I know that even if I encounter people with negative things to say, not everyone's opinions can be changed. But I want to hold my head up high, knowing that my moms have given me the strength to face anything, because in the end, family always comes first, and nothing is stronger than love. Thank you.
Is it loud enough? Okay. Okay. That's gonna be good enough. Okay. I'm not gonna say my name because said about in the speech, but to anyone who doesn't know, I am a transgender, gender fluid, pansexual. So yeah. Okay. Some of you know me as Katie, some as Kat, and some as Kaden. Most of you say to tell you what to call me, but the thing is, I'm still figuring out who I am as a trans person and wanting my name to reflect that. It takes time. One thing I will definitely ask you to call me is my preferred pronouns. I use they, them, and now that's settled, let me tell you how I knew I was trans and how I came out. Some of you knew me before I came out, and some of you knew me when I was a child. When I was a child, I always felt weird wearing dresses, skirts, or other feminine clothing. But just because I felt weird didn't mean I didn't wear these things during the span of my childhood. Whenever someone Whenever I put on dresses or skirts, I felt like I was lying to everybody about who I was. Whenever someone called me she, I felt like I was trying to be someone else. I always preferred to be pants rather than dresses or skirts, and I always wanted to be called they rather than she, but I always felt like if I told someone, I would get in trouble. I wouldn't be accepted. My mom spent most of my childhood telling me how she always wanted a daughter, and kept trying till she got one. That meant having 2 sons and a miscarriage, which was also a son before me. I always felt guilty for being trans when my mom wanted this whole other person who was a female from birth and loved being a girly girl. Because of this, I spent most of my life trying to be that girly girl daughter she always wanted. But once high school started, I continued thinking that no matter how hard I try to change, I will never feel comfortable representing the identity of a female. Once 10th grade was coming around, I knew in my mind I couldn't keep pretending to be someone I clearly wasn't. It was 3 days before school was supposed to start, and I finally decided I was going to tell my mom who I was. As we were sitting at our kitchen table playing cards, our normal evening routine, I finally said the words, "Mom,
I have something to tell you. While I let those words leave my mouth, my eyes started to water. I was so afraid that my own mother wouldn't accept me. While my brother noticed my discomfort, I asked my mother if I could tell him first to see how he would react. She agreed, and with my brother looking confused, we went upstairs. With tears in my eyes, I lowered my head and whispered that I am a transgender person. My brother reluctantly said okay and told me I had to tell my mom. So we went downstairs, and each time I hesitated, I would hear my brother say, "You have to tell her." I finally got the courage to tell her the same thing I said to my brother, but I would never have expected her reaction. The first thing she said to me with a disappointed look was, "You don't know what you're talking about." The more I tried to talk to her, the more she would shut me down with the line, "I raised a daughter," making me feel guilty about who I was and who I wasn't, thinking that I was wrong about who I was and how I wouldn't be accepted by my family and friends. I was suddenly scared about what everyone else would think. Telling my friends was easy. They all accepted and agreed to the name change, the pronoun change, and eventually the name change. They even helped correct other people who either weren't aware of the change or didn't change their actions. Some refused to refer to me as them rather than she, saying they didn't care. I eventually gave up on correcting them because no matter how times I would correct them, their mindset about the type of person I should be should never change. My teachers accepted with the common mistake of pronouns, but the thing that made it easier was them taking corrections in my feelings into play. If they mistakenly said she, they would apologize and correct themselves. The support from people is the best thing when you come out. With my friends, nothing in our relationship has changed. With my family, that topic is very restricted and quickly stopped. With my brother, nothing has changed. He still calls me she and by my birth name, refusing to accept. This experience, no matter how unsettling it may be, has taught me something. It had taught me that if I continuously try to live up to everyone's expectations about who I was, I wouldn't be me anymore. I learned that you can't make everyone happy because if one person likes this one thing about you, another person will hate it. I also learned that just because someone calls transgender people mentally ill does not mean that's what we are. Just because someone said we are wrong does not mean we are. Because no one knows what's going on inside our heads, and no one knows the familiarity of a gender that's not the one given at birth. No one knows that if you let people continue calling you a name or pronouns that you don't want, you feel like a liar. You're a fraud. I'm still working on these things, and I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out my name, not wanting my dead name to be used because that's not who I am anymore. So to anyone wondering, my name is Kaden. Thank you.
All right, let's do this one last time. My name is Evan Musso. I was asked to tell my story, and for 1 year, I've known exactly what story I was going to tell, until I actually sat down to write it. When that time came, I found myself writing and deleting and writing and deleting, until the day before it was due, I found myself with a single sentence and no sense of where to go next. So, that afternoon, like any good writer facing a deadline, I gathered up my things, and I went to the movies. Specifically, I went to the movie club screening of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, where, halfway through the movie, I realized that this movie was the story I wanted to tell. All right, let's start at the beginning one last time. My name is Evan Musso. In high school, I was bitten by a radioactive spider, and for the last 12 years, I have been the one and only Spider-Man. I'm pretty sure you know the rest. I saved a bunch of people, fell in love, saved the city again, and okay, maybe it's not exactly the story that I wanted to tell. I wasn't bitten by a radioactive spider in high school. I was gay, though, but I wasn't doing anything about it. I wasn't interested in the narrative that I'd seen connected to coming out in high school. A tumultuous heart-to-heart with my family, journey that reveals who my true friends are, dishing with my girlfriends about who the cute guys are in our grade. none of that felt true to who I was. But according to the narrative I'd been given, the narrative that I think we hear often, this meant that I wasn't being true to myself. I wasn't living my best life. I couldn't possibly be happy. And yet, I was. At the very least, I was more happy than not. I really liked high school. Like, enough to make it my job to come back to one every day. So, how could someone like me fit into this narrative? That's where the Spider-Verse comes in. A really quick movie rundown. In Into the Spider-Verse, crime boss Wilson Fisk builds a particle accelerator that leads to a brief collision of parallel universes which deposits several different spider people into one universe. We get our traditional Peter Parker Spider-Man, a black and white film noir Spider-Man, a Spider-Woman, a Japanese-American girl controlling a spider robot, and even an anthropomorphic spider pig voiced by John Mulaney. At the heart of this story, though, is Miles Morales, a black Hispanic teenager who, through seeing connections between himself and the comic books he reads, realizes he is Spider-Man, but isn't sure if he's ready to be Spider-Man and doesn't quite know how to be Spider-Man. But under the guidance of Peter Parker, what he ultimately realizes is that there is no one origin story, no one set of powers, no one way to be Spider-Man. He must figure out what being Spider-Man means to him. And if we swap out gay for Spider-Man, we can see that this is true for the LGBT experience too. I think today we do a really great job celebrating the brave members of the GSA and other openly LGBTQ community members at BHS who share their stories. We do a great job informing those who identify as straight or cisgender what the experience of others are like. But I worry that we do a disservice to people who are like I was in high school. The Act 1 of Spider-Verse Miles Morales is among us. Those of us who know something about ourselves and, for whatever our own reasons may be, aren't sharing that part of ourselves with the world right now, but who also shouldn't feel like we're living some sort of diminished version of our lives. So, for the people out there wondering when they'll be ready to share themselves more openly, this is the part where I get to play as Spider-Verse's vaguely out-of-shape Peter Parker for a bit and offer you some wisdom. When will you know you're ready to come out? You won't. It's a leap of faith. That's all it is. Okay, let's do this one last time, yeah? For real this time. This is it. My name is Evan Musso. I was asked to tell my story, and for like 4 minutes, I've been talking about Spider-Man. And I think that's okay. I don't think you need my story to figure yours out. But I know that it was helpful for Miles Morales to know that there were other spider people out there, that he wasn't alone. Other than offering that comfort, I don't think my story should have that much of an impact on yours. Because there's one other piece of Peter Parker wisdom for anyone out there who knows that they're Spider-Man, but isn't sure if they're ready to be Spider-Man and doesn't quite know how to be Spider-Man. One thing I know for sure: don't do it like me. Do it like you. Thank you.
All right, everybody. I am possibly the first person during this panel not to have a script, and that is because I am also the last person in this panel not to have a script, and also the last person in this panel in general. We're closing up. But before you guys start packing up, it's important to remember that it takes an incredible amount of courage, and it's honestly amazing. It takes an incredible amount of courage to come up here and tell your story in front of everybody here and also everybody in the school who's streaming this. So let's just give one last huge round of applause for everybody who's told their stories today. Because they deserve it very much. And also another thing before you leave, everybody, pretty much everybody in this auditorium and everybody who's watching this through streaming right now has probably seen, well, you've definitely seen all of this, and you've probably seen at least one other panel here today. And you're about to go into F block, which is the discussion block, and after that, you're going to go out into the world and interact with other people. Shocking, I know. But while you're doing that, I think it's really important to remember everything that you've heard today, because if you know other people's experiences, then you can be more compassionate towards them, and you can help make the world a better place. And hopefully, with enough experiences shared and enough compassion, we can build a better world for everybody. Thank you for coming. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe.